My name is Bill Feist, call signs WB8BZH, and I'm the Salvation Army's Southern Territory SATERN Coordinator. I'm a retired Salvation Army emergency manager with 21 years of experience as a paid emergency manager and another almost 7 years as a volunteer. I'm also a certified emergency manager, or CEM, with the International Association of Emergency Managers. Anyways, well, you've heard my background, so let's talk a little bit about how the Salvation Army is organized internationally and within the United States. You're going to get a little bit of Salvation Army 101 out of me here. Internationally, the Salvation Army is in service in 132 countries around the world. International headquarters, or IHQ, is located in London, England. Now, IHQ provides international regulation for the Salvation Army to maintain a broad worldwide consistency in its basic message and services. It supports each subordinate part of the Salvation Army with additional services and resources as needed. Now, as you look at the map here, you can see that the world is divided into 5 zones for the Salvation Army. Africa in red, the Americas and the Caribbean in blue, Europe in yellow, South Asia and the Middle East in brown, and the South Pacific and East Asia is in purple. The Salvation Army zones are divided into territories. Now, with the exception of the rules and regulations that are mandated by international headquarters, the territories are allowed to make rules and regulations that make sense for their part of the world. So let's talk about the U.S. The United States has 4 territories. The Central Territory is the one that's got the different yellow shades. The Eastern Territory has the different blue shades. The Southern Territory, which is what I'm in, is shaded in red, and then the Western Territory is shaded in green. Each territory is a legally separate nonprofit entity under U.S. law and is managed from their territorial headquarters, or THQ, in each territory. National headquarters, or NHQ, serves as a support function for the 4 territories, a point of contact for the national level government, companies, and nonprofit partners. Rules and regulations that are going to apply nationwide can only be made by a unanimous vote of the 4 territorial commanders and the national commander. If the vote's not unanimous, then each territory can decide whether to follow the recommendation or not. Let's talk about divisions here for a moment. Some territories, including the 4 U.S. territories, are divided into divisions. Divisions may be part of a state, and they may be an entire state, or they may be multiple states. Divisions are managed from their divisional headquarters, or what we call DHQ. At the local level, divisions are divided into local service areas. We'll start with the core. That's the local Salvationist church, and it's got your traditional church services and programs, but they also do social services and disaster services. Then you have service extension centers. These are physical locations with social and disaster services, but no church functions. And then you have service extension units. Those are local volunteer committees that provide very limited emergency financial assistance and limited disaster services. They do not have any physical location at all. The map shows the division that I'm in, the Alabama, Louisiana, Mississippi, or ALM division, with the coverage areas for the different corps and service centers in different colors. We don't have any service extension units in this division. Now, the Salvation Army is both a bottom-up and a top-down organization, with territories and divisions, and to some extent local units, able to have differing levels of autonomy, especially about what programs are offered in their area. So let's talk a little bit about the Salvation Army's mission. First of all, the Salvation Army is not a social services organization, okay? Now, despite that, it is one of the world's largest providers of social services, but many people think it's a social service organization. It is not. It is not a disaster services organization. And again, many people think that it is, but it's not. But it does provide disaster services of many kinds throughout the world. Oops. What the Salvation Army is a church. The Salvation Army is a separate Protestant evangelical denomination that provides essential community services throughout the world. Its members are known as Salvationists. Local churches are known as core. The pastors and clergy are called officers, and they'll wear red epaulets on their uniform, like you see on the slide there. Lay members are soldiers, and they'll have blue epaulets on their uniforms, much like what I do here. Now, Salvation Army staff and volunteers do not have to be affiliated with or members of the Salvation Army. In fact, most staff and volunteers are not members of the Salvation Army Church. Here's the mission statement for the Salvation Army, and I'm just going to read it real quickly. The Salvation Army, an international movement, is an evangelical part of the universal Christian church. Its message is based on the Bible. Its ministry is motivated by the love of God. Its mission is to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ and to meet human needs in his name without discrimination. Now, the first sentence clearly states that the Salvation Army is an evangelical part of the universal church. It is a church. Now, the first part of the actual mission statement reads, to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ. Now, it's vital that you understand that this part of the Salvation Army's mission comes first above anything and everything else. It's the driving force behind the original founding of the Salvation Army in 1865 and why it has continued for nearly 157 years. The second part of the mission statement sentence reads, to meet human needs in his name without discrimination. For the Salvation Army, meeting human needs is simply another way of preaching the gospel, but through actions rather than words. St. Francis of Assisi once said, I witness for Christ all the time, and sometimes I even use words. Now, my favorite Salvation Army slogan reads, the Salvation Army, Christianity with its sleeves rolled up. To me, these two statements typify the Salvation Army's priority that service is a means of witnessing and not merely an end within itself. It is what both the Salvation Army's social services and emergency disaster services are really all about. So, how does the Salvation Army go about fulfilling this mission? First of all, again, the Salvation Army is a church that provides essential community programs such as religious services and programs, social services, and emergency disaster services. I'll talk just a little bit about the religious programs so that you get an idea of the scope of what the Army is involved in. First of all, obviously, because we're a church, we do Sunday worship services, which we call holiness meetings. We do praise and worship music in those services. There's brass band music in those services, which is kind of unusual for churches. But, brass bands have actually been a tradition in the Salvation Army since its founding. They do Sunday school for both adults and children, adult Bible studies, men's ministries, women's ministries. In fact, the Salvation Army was one of the first denominations to ordain women as ministers, and that in the Victorian era, long before any of the other churches were doing it. We are involved in youth ministries. Many of our core partner with boys and girls clubs around the country. summer camps and vacation Bible schools. So with the exception of some of the basics, church programs can be very different in different localities because the Salvation Army adjusts its services to meet the needs of the community it is serving in that local area. All of these programs are generally organized and run by the corps officers or clergy, their staff, and some of the soldiers and volunteers of the church. Social services. Again, we're a church, but we're also one of the largest social services providers in the world. Social service programs are the Salvation Army's primary means of witnessing for Christ by meeting human needs without discrimination. These programs include emergency financial assistance, thrift stores, drug and alcohol rehab programs, homeless shelters, and a myriad of other similar programs. With the exception of some of the basics, again, social services can be very different in different localities because, again, the Salvation Army adjusts its services to meet the needs of that particular community. And again, these programs are generally supervised by the corps officers and their staff. As you can probably tell, the corps officers are usually very, very busy. And then we have emergency disaster services. The services that the Salvation Army provides for emergency disaster services, or EDS, varies widely around the world and even within the United States. In the United States, it's really focused on two different kinds of missions. We have primary missions, which are usually our mass fixed and mobile feeding and hydration, and emotional and spiritual care. Those are the things we do every time we go out. When a disaster hits, we get our feeding vehicles out and we send out our feeding vehicle and people to provide mobile feeding and hydration. We send out people to do emotional and spiritual care. Depending upon the scope of the disaster and the funding available and the needs of the community at the time, we may also do what we call secondary missions, which includes bulk distribution of disaster goods like food boxes and the likes, emergency financial assistance, and long-term recovery. But again, that really depends upon the scope of the disaster and the financial and human resources that are available. So let's talk about how the Salvation Army responds to and manages disasters. Here's my division again, the Alabama, Louisiana, and Mississippi division. Now, just as it is in emergency management in the United States, disaster response is scalable. So when a disaster starts, and here's some towns, the stars where our divisional headquarters is at. So when a disaster starts, like let's say a hurricane that strikes Louisiana, as has been happening a lot the last 2 or 3 years, the disaster response begins at the local level with a response by the local Salvation Army unit. Now, if that local Salvation Army unit is in need of additional resources, they don't have enough resources to handle the response, they're going to contact divisional headquarters and ask for assistance. Divisional headquarters, in turn, is going to contact other corps and local units throughout the division, and those other local units will send additional resources to the disaster area. If divisional headquarters finds that they still don't have enough resources to help the problem, and they've run out within the division, then they're going to contact our territorial headquarters, which for the Southern Territory is in Atlanta. Okay, the territorial headquarters will then send resources on into the disaster area from all of the divisions within the Southern Territory, and there are 8 divisions in the Southern Territory right now. Now, if that's not enough, then territorial headquarters will contact national headquarters. National headquarters, in turn, will talk to the other 3 territories within the United States, and all of those territories will start sending resources, personnel, equipment, and so on into the disaster area to help out. And in the very, very rare event that national headquarters, the entire nation, all 4 territories don't have enough resources, then national headquarters will contact international headquarters, and other resources from around the world will come in. I've seen that happen only a couple of times. I think the one that really sticks out in my mind is in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. We had people in from Canada, Mexico, Europe, really from all over the world following Hurricane Katrina. It doesn't happen often, but it does happen. The other thing I want to point out is a really important point. The control of that disaster remains with divisional headquarters. Okay, so it doesn't matter if territorial headquarters has become involved, or national headquarters, or even international headquarters has become involved. The control of the disaster, the person who's making the decisions for that disaster, is ultimately the divisional commander. Territory doesn't come in and take over. National doesn't come in and take over. International doesn't come in and take over. It remains on the shoulders of the divisional commander. And that's an important point to keep in mind. Okay. In the US, the Salvation Army uses the same incident command system that is used by by government, and by private emergency management and emergency responders in the US. Now, positions within the ICS structure are filled by a combination of officers, soldiers, staff, and volunteers. All personnel who are deployed to a disaster site must be credentialed, which includes a photo ID after going through a background check and some basic disaster training. High-level disaster leadership positions require additional training and experience beyond the basics that are involved. This is also true for our SATERN volunteers who want to be net managers or SATERN coordinators or some other primary leadership position. They too have to be credentialed. Being credentialed is not required, I repeat, not required for amateur radio operators who simply want to check into a SATERN net. All amateur radio operators are welcome to check into a SATERN net at any time. They don't have to be members of the church. They don't have to be credentialed or registered with the Salvation Army or anything else. They're all welcome. Being credentialed is not required for SATERN volunteers who do not want to be deployed unless they're going to be in a high-level leadership position in SATERN, again, such as a net manager or a SATERN coordinator. Now, here's the caution. It takes from 2 to 3 months to be credentialed. After every major disaster, I get calls from SATERN volunteers who want to be deployed to this disaster that's happening right now. And I have to tell them that there just isn't time to get them credentialed before the response is going to be over. And particularly an MCOM response, which generally speaking lasts anywhere from 72 hours to maybe a week as a general rule. You just can't get them credentialed in that kind of time. So if anyone joins the Salvation Army and becomes an official SATERN volunteer, I always encourage them that if they even think they might want to someday be deployed sometime, I encourage them to get credentialed now, because it takes so long to get done otherwise. Now, in the Southern Territory, I can't speak for the other territories, but in the Southern Territory, all of our professional paid disaster personnel, including myself, are either certified emergency managers or associate emergency managers in the International Association of Emergency Managers, or IAEM. Now, to become a CEM or AEM, a candidate must demonstrate and maintain a strong history of professional disaster training, experience, and leadership. I still, even though I'm retired, I still retain my CEM certification. I'm currently working on obtaining a lifetime CEM certification for retired emergency managers. Now, Although this level of certification is not required of EDS or SATERN volunteers, the Salvation Army always encourages its volunteers to maintain a high level of training, experience, and overall professionalism, as is possible. So let's talk a little bit about SATERN, what its vision is for the future. SATERN was created by Major Pat McPherson, a Whiskey Whiskey 9 Echo, who became a silent key in May of 2016. SATERN was created to provide emergency communications support for the Salvation Army in disasters. After, in the last 30 or so years, SATERN has gained over 1,000 registered SATERN operators in the United States. There's another 180 that are registered worldwide. And we continue to operate on a number of VHF, HF, and UHF frequencies, mostly voice nets, but not all, around the country and around the world. But that was the 20th century. Let's talk about the future of SATERN as we see it in the 21st century. Today, SATERN is being asked by the Salvation Army leadership to continue with its amateur radio efforts, but they're also asking us to explore a variety of new modes in amateur radio, as well as a variety of new emergency communications tools for the emergency communications toolbox, things that include like the digital modes on amateur radio. Central Territory has recently established a national DMR net on Wednesdays. The Southern Territory, my territory, is developing a Southern Territory SATERN WinLink training net that we hope to have on the air by late February of this year. And in the future, we also hope to get started a digital net for other digital modes. SATERN has been very busy developing partnerships with other nonprofit and government programs like ARES, REACT, the National Hurricane Center's WX4 NHC, the Voice over IP Weather and Hurricane Nets, ARPSA, which is the Amateur Radio Public Service Alliance, and also the Hurricane WatchNet. Now, we've developed a very strong partnership with the Hurricane WatchNet. For years, they have operated on 14.325 megahertz. In our new partnership with them, SATERN now operates its international SATERN single sideband net on that same frequency at 10:30 in the morning Central Time on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and on 14.320 on Saturdays. When the Hurricane WatchNet is activated for a hurricane, SATERN activates its operators to provide additional receiving stations and to handle any health and welfare message traffic that comes to the Hurricane WatchNet. If a major Category 3, 4, or 5 hurricane makes landfall along the U.S. coast or the Caribbean or the Central America, SATERN remains activated to handle any post-disaster emergency communications messages from the affected areas. The Hurricane WatchNet folks provide us with additional operators to supplement our efforts. Excuse me just a second here. SATERN is also developing partnerships with government services such as Mars and Shares. And we've already worked with Mars on a number of emergency communication exercises. We are also trying to promote within the Salvation Army with our professional staff government emergency communications resources, such as the Government Emergency Telecom Service, or GETS, or the Wireless Priority Service, which is WPS, or the Telecommunications Service Priority. We've also had some of our divisions and local units to gain permission to be on the 700 and 800 megahertz radio system that the first responders use in local areas. One of the other things that we've been doing is advancing the use of UHF business band radios. The Salvation Army has 4 licenses for 2 UHF business band repeater pairs that are good nationwide. All of the licenses support both voice or digital services. Now, several divisions in both the Central and Southern Territories have UHF business band repeaters for those frequencies. And UHF radios have been deployed more than once because operators don't need a license. So it's been really convenient for our IMATs, our incident management teams in particular, to use those. SATERN operators, however, are still needed to manage the system out in the field. Another thing that we've been starting to use just recently are what's called mobile broadband kits. These are essentially MiFis on very heavy-duty steroids. They're capable of communicating with distant cell phone towers outside of a disaster area and providing Wi-Fi, telephone, and computer internet service to an incident management team. These have mostly replaced our former satellite-based internet services, and they've been successfully deployed on a number of occasions already here in the South. The Salvation Army also has partnerships with some of the major cellular companies, such as AT&T, Verizon. They give us they give our IMATs access to quickly deployed command and communications trailers. This service was used after the major flooding in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, here a few years back. And then the Salvation Army also has a number of its own communications vehicles and trailers. They all have amateur radio on them. Some of them have business band radio systems on them. And there are trailers in both the Central Territory and the Southern Territories that I know of. And there may be others out there that I'm just frankly not familiar with. Hang on just a second here. Okay. There. Okay. So SATERN is gradually expanding beyond amateur radio at this point. It is becoming about providing the very best emergency communications tools from our emergency communications toolbox to get the job done. Now, that might mean that we're going to use amateur radio one time and business radio another time, or maybe deploy a mobile broadband kit, or we might work with shares or set up a mesh network, or work closely with our partners in a disaster, or it might be some combination of all of the above. For us, the goal is not to be the amateur radio experts for the Salvation Army. The goal is to be the emergency communications experts for the Salvation Army. You know, Bob Dylan once wrote a song that had the words in it, "The times they are a-changing," and nothing could be more true for SATERN in the 21st century. It means that as SATERN grows into this kind of new way of thinking about and doing emergency communications, our volunteers, especially those who get deployed to a disaster site, are needing to keep up with the times and a wide variety of communications technology and services. That's going to take time, work, and effort. This is all a work in progress. It's an aspiration. It's where we want to be, but not necessarily where we are right now. It's going to take time, probably many years, and we'll always kind of be chasing a constantly changing goal. But the bottom line for us is we want to remain relevant to the emergency communications needs of our served agencies, in our case, the Salvation Army. And for SATERN, this means that we have to continue to expand and diversify our services and our methods. So let's talk about volunteering with the Salvation Army. Being a volunteer in the 21st century is challenging. You know, when I started out in emergency communications longer ago than I want to admit to, All you needed was a radio and a desire to help. Sometimes you didn't even need the radio. It was some mentor or the club would provide that. Today, that's really not true anymore. That just doesn't happen so much. So what does it take to become a SATERN volunteer in the 21st century's post 9/11 world? First of all, for those who want to become a volunteer, they need to go to the National EDS website, and it's at disastersalvationarmy.org, which is right up here at the top. When you get there, if you look, you'll see there's a black menu line there. You're going to want to click on the volunteer tab. Once you've done that, then just follow the prompts to complete the profile. When the profile is completed, it's going to check you out, and you need to sign back into your profile with the password that you just created and complete the registration to become a credentialed disaster service and SATERN volunteer. And there is an instruction sheet that's available. And if you send me an email, my email will be on the credits at the end of this program. Send me an email and I'll send you a copy of the instruction sheet. Or better yet, I believe that all of this is going to get posted on the RATPAC library. I'll send that sheet so it can be posted as well. That'll probably work better for everybody. Now, being a volunteer does not mean you're not expected to be professional. So there are some questions that people really need to ask themselves when they're thinking about whether they want to be deployed or not. They need to ask why they want to go. Now, for some people, they're going to tell you they're there to evangelize or sell amateur radio to the people, to the served agency that they're working with. Some people will tell you, or at least admit to themselves that, you know, their secret fantasy is to save the day with their radio. Other people are there to impress the others with their emergency communication skills or how long they've been licensed. And I hear this one all the time. The only thing they'll do is emergency communications. They're not going to do anything else but emergency communications. Don't even ask. Now, on the other hand, there are others who will say that they want to go to meet the needs of their served agency. They want to help the agency serve disaster survivors. For those who are in faith-based organizations, they may tell you that they're there to serve God by serving those in need. And some will just tell you they just want to serve. They just want to be there and do the right thing. So if people who have chosen those first sets of reasons, I need to say that those are just absolutely the wrong reasons for deploying. You know, they're just the wrong reasons. I don't mean to offend anybody by saying that, but when they show up on scene, I have to tell you, the incident commanders are frustrated with those with people with those motivations, and it just doesn't work well for anybody. Now there are others who show up for that second set of reasons. For them, it's all about the service and the teamwork. They're there to serve, support their served agency and their mission. And for them, it's all about meeting the needs of the served agency as they serve disaster survivors, and not about meeting their own needs. Again, we're there to serve. Those are the motivations that we look for, at least within the Salvation Army, for people who are going to deploy. So let's talk a little bit about who do they report to? Who's the boss? Remember the incident command system chart I showed you a little bit ago? Within the incident command system, the communications unit is part of the logistics section. That means everyone in the communications unit, including SATERN operators, follow the orders of the logistics chief or their designee, which is usually the communications unit leader, which in OXCOM is called the COM-L. Now, on a Salvation Army deployment, it's not unusual to be asked to do non-emergency communications tasks. Excuse me. This is usually a temporary assignment and may have absolutely nothing to do with what they were originally deployed for. Might be something like helping with a drive-through bulk goods distribution. Might be doing some temporary mass feeding on a congregate feeding site on a serving line. It could be any one of a number of non-emergency communications tasks as needed. But again, bottom line is, within the Salvation Army, we're there to serve. Now, usually this happens when either no critical emergency communication tasks are happening at that time, or if there's just a major project for survivors that requires kind of all hands on deck. The Salvation Army chronically understaffs its IMAT teams. It's one of the few complaints I have about the Army is they really do. Everybody works really, really hard if you go out on an IMAT. There's no extra personnel, and so a lot of times they just have to, they have to collect everybody, and it's all hands on deck. But again, we're there to serve. There was an article in 2021 called Perspectives, Keys to Success with Emergency Management and the EOC. It was a really good article by an ARES unit in Florida that brought out a lot of what I've just talked about and helped put it in a very clear focus. I highly recommend this article, and I'm going to just show you quickly how to get to it at the end of this program. That'll eventually be, I guess, be put on your website. The link to the program will also be there, but let me just show you. I'm going to go to the ARRL website. Up on their top menu line, there's a spot that'll say Public Service. On the left, there will be another spot that says ARES. And then on the left again, there will be an ARES letter issues. And then 2021, the date, May 19, 2021. And then you select the name of the article. Perspectives, Keys to Success with Emergency Management and the EOC. That was it. So I don't know, the moderator, do we have time for questions or what happens next?
That's exactly what's going to happen here. Barry, you want to get some out of chat? I've seen a lot of them coming in.
Sure. I think we should just get Steve K4CJX on to ask all of his questions that he posted. So Steve, you want to go ahead and ask your questions?
Bill, can you lower your desktop?
Oh, you want me to stop sharing?
Yes, please. Makes
Okay.
it a lot easier.
Okay, there we go.
Let's
better?
see.
Yes.
Okay, Bill,
Yes.
the question is, does the Salvation Army provide any liability coverage, workers' comp, or any other than maybe a uniform for the volunteer resources? Do they provide any kind of liability?
No, they really don't. When you sign up as a volunteer, you'll get you'll be instructed in some of that in the training that you take. It's called Introduction to Disaster Services. The Salvation Army does not carry insurance on its volunteers. The volunteers need to have their own insurance that's available.
All right, second question I had, does your credentialing require any specific level of FEMA NIMS ICS training or ECD courses?
No,
No requirements?
No, it does not require any of that. Any of that. To be credentialed, we have to have a valid photo to put on the ID card. You have to go through a background check. You're going to go through Introduction to Disaster Services, which is our basic training program. It's kind of it's part of what you got here, and then a lot more about tips for deploying, how the incident command system works, a little bit of history about the Salvation Army. So it's about a 3 or 4 hour program that they teach. And then you'll go through what's called, it's called in this territory, Safe from Harm. I think that's what it's called in all the territories except the West. The West calls it something else, but basically it's a course on how to interact with vulnerable people, children, vulnerable adults, that sort of thing.
All right. The last question is, do you have an SCC LMR license, or do you ask for an STA or a waiver when it comes to the use of interoperability, NIFOG frequencies, mutual aid state frequencies, so that you can interact with the incident command staff?
The last time I was involved with, you're talking about the 700 and 800 megahertz system, right?
Well, it depends. No, there's a NIFOG could be either VHF. There are mutual aid frequencies that each state has that are either VHF, UHF, or 800, 700 trunking. They're all bridged together usually in an incident, or when the federal agencies come into play, they also are the national, the NIFOG national interoperability frequencies that put a communication common with all services there.
Okay. To be honest with you, the last time I dealt with any of that was, oh my goodness, I got to think, 17 years ago now, easily. I've not had a whole lot of interaction with that since then. So I'm really not qualified to answer your question.
Okay.
Okay. Let's see. Jim K7QCK wants to know, can you advise us of the DMR talk groups you're using?
My email address will, my email address will be in the program when it gets put up on your site. Drop me an email and I'll send you the information. I don't have it off the top of my head.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Don KE7ARH from Washington wants to know, could you talk more about the use of cellular systems data connections and the use of that compared to satellites for data? Are there still uses for satellite data up and down links? Okay.
What we've had and used satellites. In fact, our satellite, our communications trailer here in ALM has a satellite dish on it. It's not active. It was expensive. I mean, it was like $250 a month for something that we used once every 2 or 3 years, maybe. It was just outrageously expensive. When we started to learn about these mobile broadband kits, we found that for most disasters, not all, there are exceptions, but for most disasters, usually some of the cell towers survive. They may be 10 or 15 miles outside of the disaster area, but they're still on the air, they're still working. And the wonderful thing about these mobile broadband kits is they're designed to pick up the signals from that far away and be able to transmit to them that far away and make a Wi-Fi, or a cellular connection that can be converted into Wi-Fi. Like I say, it's a lot like the little MiFis you get or the hotspot on your phone. It's just that because their antennas are so much better, they work. So satellites, for us at least, I'm not aware of anybody who's using them anymore. I think everybody's using them. And I have heard that even the news organizations now have gotten away from the big satellite trucks and are using this kind of technology.
A lot of agencies are doing that, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, Don also wants to know, how often do the USA Salvation Army teams deploy to other countries? For example, Puerto Rico or Haiti or other countries, I would assume.
Puerto Rico, of course, is a territory of the United States. In fact, it's in the Puerto Rico is part of our Eastern Territory. For the Salvation Army, they cover Puerto Rico, so that's not really a problem for us to send people there. Internationally, that comes on when you start talking about going to other countries. That's something that's done through international headquarters. And excuse me just a second. Throat's getting really dry from all of this talking. International deployments are an entirely different animal from domestic deployments. First of all, most international deployments for international disaster services, they're like a 3-month deployment. Our deployments are 2-week deployments. And they require a great deal of very specialized kind of training. So I won't say that it can't happen. I'm only aware of maybe a couple of times where it has happened. So it's rare.
Okay. And Tom from Maryland wants to know if you've overcome your flooding issues.
No, actually, I haven't. In fact, I just got a quote today from a contractor to come in and work on the house, and I'm waiting for yet another. So no, we're still working on trying to find contractors. I don't know how it is elsewhere in the country, although I've heard it's the same. But here, the contractors are so busy they can't see straight. Between that and COVID, just ripping through all of their workers and so on, it's just really, really hard to find somebody to even give you a quote. It's taken me 2 or 3 months just to get a quote, much less get the work done. So no, I'm not over it yet. But thank you for asking.
To follow up with that, with the Salvation Army, are you seeing a lot of decrease in your volunteers because of COVID?
Well, that's a toughie for me to answer. I'm not sure. I would have to ask. I really don't know how that's working out for the larger Salvation Army.
Okay. That's all the questions from chat, Dan.
Okay, well, thank you much. I don't see anybody raising their hand. So
Hold on, there's somebody.
Yep, Peter, you're in there fast, and then the Bert team in there. So people got the fingers on the button there. Bert, Peter, go ahead.
Okay, thanks. I just wanted to mention that within the broadcast industry, they pretty much adopted what they call bonded cellular. And this is where you can have multiple cell circuits that are actually tied together for high-speed internet type activity. And it's also a specialized service. It can cross carriers, and it requires well, it has a higher priority on the overall cell infrastructure. So if you require real-time data transfer, bonded cellular can give you that kind of performance.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Go ahead, Bill.
I guess, I'm open for any questions.
Well, we got more for you. We have more for you.
Oh, go ahead. I don't know how long you want to go on, but
We're doing fine. Brent, you want to, over in Canada, you want to come on?
Okay, thanks, Dan. Appreciate that. Thank you, Bill, for that presentation. That was really a great presentation. Really enjoyed that. Because I'm into D-Star and also DMR, okay, I have an 880 sitting in the other room by my recliner, so I can actually talk D-Star. If I sent you an email, is it possible that I could get the information for those nets down in that area?
Yeah, well, for DMR, I'm not familiar with any of the D-Star nets, but
Oh,
although I understand they're working on trying to get a number of different modes to be able to check into the excuse me, sorry, the
Bless you.
DMR net, such as D-Star, Echolink, and I forget what some of the others are. Someday I'd like to play with DMR. I just haven't had the time. But yeah, send me an email and I'll send you the info.
okay. And also, are you involved highly in WinLink at this time?
Yes. I'm part of the WinLink working group, and we are, as I mentioned during my presentation, we're working on trying to put together a Southern Territory WinLink training net that we hope to have on the air by the end of February.
Well, that's great.
So, yeah.
Because I am involved with WinLink, and I'm just trying to make contacts down south as best I can. So you might get one if I use your email address there.
Okay, sure. That'd be fine.
All right. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it very much.
Well, thank you.
When I send out the follow-up that includes links to this video and documentations and such, I'll put your email address right on that. So as soon as they get that first email, they can get that stuff and they don't have to go through all the other stuff to get to you.
Okay. I will send you the PDF of the PowerPoint. I'll send you the PDF of my talking points, the script that kind of goes with the PowerPoint, and a copy of the instructions for how to register to be a Salvation Army or a disaster or SATERN volunteer.
Okay, we'll get all that included. Appreciate it very much. Are there any more questions? I don't see.
Bill, if you will contact me or I'll contact you, there are some very good ready-made training programs for end users on WinLink, and I'll be happy to send them your way.
Yeah, when my email address comes up, send that to me. I know there are a number of training nets out there already. React, I know in the Central Territory has been very active in that. This new group called ETO, Emergency Training Organization, I think it's called. They've been very active. So I know there's a number of WinLink nets out there. We're certainly not going to be the first one by any means.
No, this training is hands-on and is a component of a particular state's ComL or Oxcom training. It's
Okay.
really good, really good.
Okay. Yeah, there's a lot of it going on out there right now.
All right, I'll send it to you. Thank you.
All righty. Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any more hands up. Barry, how we doing in the text?
We're good in the chat.
Okay, well, Bill, you done a great job.
Thank you.
Steve says you're a heck of a good guy. I have to hardly agree with him.
Well, that's very kind of him. I enjoyed it. I appreciate you all having me, and I'd be happy to come back again someday.
Okay, and likewise, if you see a need to, if you want to get a particular message for the Salvation Army, you want to get out there involving communications, let us know. We'll get you in there.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate that.
For your information, this will be put on YouTube, and it will be on various other venues. So when you go look down there and see 48 people, that's not what's happening.
Okay.
No, when we started this all out, we had some of our presentations were above 500, in fact. And what's happened is a lot of people, especially on the East Coast, have learned that they can just wait for the video.
Oh my. Yeah. It's kind of what streaming TV is doing to the movie theaters in some ways.
Yes, yes. Time marches on.
Michelle has her hand up, Dan.
Okay, Michelle.
Yeah, when when it's put out on YouTube, can you provide that YouTube link for everyone?
Yes, when I sent out the follow-up, there'll be a YouTube link in there, and you can just click on that and see it with the YouTube, yes.
All right, thank you so much.
Keep in mind, I sent out a copy of what's in chat. Often there's links that people put in there, other information useful afterwards. So if you set that as a direct message, it won't be in there. On none of the direct messages, there's no private and they don't show up. Okay, looking in for anything else. This has been a great presentation. And nothing in, no hands up. Barry?
We're good in the chat, Dan.